"Excuse me, but this marriage is a trap," the poor girl told the millionaire, and his smile vanished instantly. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Plaza Hotel cast a golden glow over what was meant to be the wedding of the century. 300 of New York's elite filled the opulent ballroom, their whispered conversations creating a gentle hum beneath the soft notes of the string quartet. At the altar, billionaire Nathan Blake stood tall in his custom Italian tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes fixed on the ornate double doors where his bride would soon appear. Victoria Reynolds was everything society expected Nathan to marry: sophisticated, beautiful, and from old money. Her entrance was flawless, gliding down the pearl-white runner in a $50,000 designer gown that hugged her figure like liquid silk. Diamond earrings caught the light with every step, and her smile was practiced perfection. The guests murmured their approval as she approached the altar, her hand delicately placed on her father's arm. "We are gathered here today," the minister began, his voice echoing through the vast space, "to witness the union of Nathan Blake and Victoria Reynolds in holy matrimony." Nathan's chest swelled with satisfaction. At 52, he had built an empire from nothing, turning his small construction company into Blake Industries, one of the most powerful conglomerates on the East Coast. Victoria would be the perfect partner for the next chapter of his life. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then came the sound that would change everything. The ballroom doors burst open with a thunderous bang that silenced the string quartet mid-note. Every head turned in unison as a small figure came running down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor like rapid heartbeats. It was a child, a little girl of no more than 7 years old, wearing a simple yellow dress that looked homemade compared to the designer gowns surrounding her. Her dark hair was pulled back in 2 neat braids, and her brown eyes blazed with determination that seemed far too intense for someone so young. "Excuse me," she called out in a clear, ringing voice that carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. "Excuse me, but this wedding is a trap." The collective gasp from 300 guests created a sound like rushing wind. Victoria's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup, her bouquet trembling in her suddenly shaking hands. Nathan felt his smile freeze on his face as recognition dawned. Emma Turner, the daughter of his housekeeper, Lucy, the quiet little girl who often sat in the corner of his study, coloring in her books while her mother worked. How had she gotten here? How had she gotten past security? "Security," Victoria whispered urgently to her maid of honor. "Get that child out of here immediately." But Nathan raised his hand, his businessman's instincts telling him something was very wrong. In all his years of negotiations and boardroom battles, he had learned to trust his gut. And right now, his gut was screaming that he needed to listen. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Let her speak." Emma stopped directly in front of the altar, her small chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. She looked up at Nathan with eyes that held a sincerity he hadn't seen in years of corporate meetings and social gatherings. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice steady despite her youth. "They changed the important papers. I saw them. The lady with the pretty dress and the man with the mean eyes. They switched them when they thought nobody was looking." "What is she talking about?" Victoria demanded, her perfect composure cracking. "Nathan, this is ridiculous, a child's imagination running wild on our wedding day." But Nathan was studying Emma's face, remembering all the times he had found her quietly observing from corners, always listening, always watching with those intelligent eyes. Children, he realized, saw things adults missed. They hadn't yet learned to ignore inconvenient truths. "What papers, Emma?" he asked gently, kneeling down to her level despite his expensive tuxedo. Emma reached into the small purse she carried, a child's accessory that no one had thought to search, and pulled out a pink plastic camera. "I took pictures," she said simply, "like the detectives on TV." The ballroom erupted in chaos as Nathan took the camera with trembling hands, knowing somehow that this little girl was about to save him from the biggest mistake of his life. Nathan's hands shook as he scrolled through the tiny camera's digital display. The images were blurry, taken from a child's perspective, but they clearly showed documents being exchanged in his private study. Victoria's face appeared in several shots, along with a man Nathan didn't recognize. "This is preposterous." Victoria's voice rose above the murmur of confused guests. "You're going to believe the fantasy of a 7-year-old over your own fiancé?" But Nathan's attention was fixed on Emma, who stood perfectly still amid the chaos, her small hands clasped in front of her yellow dress. There was something remarkable about this child, a quiet intelligence that he had noticed during her visits to his mansion, but never truly appreciated. Emma Turner wasn't like other children her age. While most 7-year-olds chattered constantly, Emma observed. She absorbed everything around her with the intensity of a scientist studying specimens. Her mother, Lucy, often apologized for bringing her to work, explaining that childcare was too expensive on a housekeeper's salary, especially with her medical bills mounting. Lucy Turner had been widowed 3 years earlier when Emma was just 4. Her husband, a police officer, had died in a car accident, leaving Lucy to raise Emma alone while battling her own chronic illness. The job at Blake Industries was a lifeline. Good pay, health insurance, and Nathan had always been understanding. When Lucy needed to bring Emma to the mansion, what none of them realized was that Emma had been inadvertently conducting surveillance for months. The little girl possessed what child psychologists called hyperthymesia, an unusually vivid autobiographical memory. She remembered conversations word for word, could recall the exact placement of objects, and noticed patterns that escaped adult attention. To Emma, the world was like a giant coloring book where every detail mattered. During those quiet afternoons in Nathan's study, while Lucy cleaned other parts of the mansion, Emma had watched and listened. She had seen Victoria meet with the stern-faced man multiple times. She had noticed how they whispered and moved papers when they thought no one was looking. She had observed Victoria's different smiles, the genuine one she used with Nathan, and the cold, calculating one she wore when he wasn't around. "Mr. Blake," Emma said softly, tugging on his tuxedo jacket. The mean man called her partner, not like married partners, like business partners. And she laughed differently when you weren't there. The ballroom fell silent. Nathan felt his world tilting on its axis as he looked into Emma's earnest brown eyes. In that moment, he realized that this child had been protecting him without even knowing it. "Where is your mother, Emma?" he asked gently. "She's sick today, really sick. She couldn't come to work, so I took the bus. I had to warn you before it was too late." A 7-year-old had traveled across the city alone to save him from a trap he hadn't even seen coming. Nathan stood slowly, his decision made. "The wedding is canceled," he announced to the stunned crowd. "Everyone, please enjoy the reception. Victoria and I need to discuss some business matters." As security escorted a furious Victoria away, Nathan knelt beside Emma again. "You saved me today, but I think you might have put yourself in danger too." Emma nodded solemnly. "Bad people don't like it when kids tell the truth. Daddy used to say that." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. If Emma was right about Victoria, then she had just exposed something much bigger than a simple gold digger scheme. And now a 7-year-old girl was right in the middle of it. 3 days earlier, before the world knew Emma Turner's name, before billionaire weddings were canceled, before security footage would be subpoenaed, there was just a little girl with a coloring book, sitting beneath Nathan Blake's mahogany desk. Lucy had been feeling particularly weak that morning. Her lupus was flaring again, making even simple tasks exhausting, but she couldn't afford to miss work. The medical bills were piling up, and Nathan's generous salary was the only thing keeping them afloat. So when Emma's school had an unexpected half-day, Lucy had no choice but to bring her daughter to the mansion. "Just sit quietly, sweetheart," Lucy had whispered, settling Emma in Nathan's study with her coloring supplies. "Mommy needs to finish the guest bedrooms before Mr. Blake comes home." Emma loved Nathan's study. It smelled like leather and old books, and the afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, creating perfect rectangles of light on the Persian carpet. She had spread out her coloring book, a detective story for children, and was carefully filling in a scene of a girl detective hiding behind a desk, just like she was. That's when she heard the voices. Are you absolutely certain he won't? Notice the changes? Victoria's voice was different from the sweet tone she used around Nathan. It was sharp, businesslike, almost cold. Emma's father had been a police officer, and before he died, he had taught her important lessons about safety. Some people wear masks, little bird, he used to say, calling her by his special nickname. They act nice, but inside they're thinking mean thoughts. Trust your feelings if something doesn't seem right. Something definitely didn't seem right. Emma carefully moved to peer around the edge of the desk. Victoria stood near Nathan's safe, which was open, talking to a tall man in an expensive suit. Emma had never seen him before, but his eyes reminded her of the wolves in her storybooks, calculating and hungry. Nathan trusts me completely, Victoria was saying, pulling out a thick folder. He signed the original prenuptial agreement, weeks ago. He'll never think to review it again before the wedding. The man, James Garrett, though Emma wouldn't learn his name until much later, opened his briefcase and removed an identical-looking folder. The new version transfers 70% of his assets to you in case of divorce instead of the standard 10% he agreed to, plus immediate access to his business accounts. Emma watched, fascinated, as they carefully switched the documents. She didn't understand all the big words they were using, but she understood deception. It was like when her classmate Sally would switch test papers when the teacher wasn't looking. What about the child? James asked, nodding toward the corner, where Emma sat hidden. She's here often. Emma. Victoria laughed dismissively. She's just the housekeeper's brat. Barely speaks, just colors her little pictures. Even if she saw something, who would believe a 7-year-old? Emma felt a familiar sensation, the same feeling she'd had when her father explained that sometimes good people had to gather evidence against bad people. Moving as quietly as her father had taught her, she reached for the pink camera Nathan had given her for her last birthday. She had been practicing taking pictures of everything, flowers in the garden, Lucy at work, even the mansion's cats. The camera made a soft clicking sound that the adults engrossed in their criminal conversation didn't notice. Click. Victoria placing the new document in the safe. Click. James putting the original papers in his briefcase. Click. Victoria and James shaking hands, their smiles cold and predatory. By this time next week, I'll control one of the largest fortunes on the East Coast, Victoria said, closing the safe. Nathan Blake won't know what hit him. They left the study, their footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Emma remained hidden for several more minutes, her small heart pounding. She looked down at her coloring book where the little detective girl was hiding behind furniture, gathering clues to solve a mystery. Just like her. Emma carefully closed her coloring book and slipped the camera into her small purse. She didn't fully understand what she had witnessed, but her father's voice echoed in her memory. When you see someone doing wrong, little bird, it's your job to make sure they're right. People find out. As she waited for her mother to finish work, Emma began planning. She had 3 days until the wedding. 3 days to figure out how to warn Mr. Blake that the woman he loved was wearing a mask. 3 days to be the detective her father had always told her she could be. Back at the altar of the Grand Plaza Hotel, Nathan stared at the small pink camera, in his hands his wedding guests murmuring anxiously behind him. Victoria's face had gone from flushed anger to pale terror as she watched him scroll through Emma's photographs. Nathan, darling, Victoria said, her voice strained but attempting sweetness. Surely you don't believe this child over me. She's probably been playing make-believe, taking pictures of nothing important. But Nathan's expression grew darker with each image. Despite their awkward angles and childish composition, the photos clearly showed Victoria and an unknown man exchanging documents in his private study. His study, his safe, his personal files. Who is this man, Victoria? Nathan's voice was deadly quiet. I don't know what you're talking about. Victoria's hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet. Nathan, please, you're embarrassing us both, in front of everyone. Emma stepped closer to Nathan, unintimidated by the chaos around her. She called him Mr. Garrett. He had mean eyes and carried a black case. They put your papers in his case and put new papers in your safe. The simplicity of Emma's explanation cut through Victoria's elaborate protests like a knife. Nathan had built his empire by reading people, by trusting his instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming that this 7-year-old was telling the truth. The prenuptial agreement, Nathan said slowly, pieces clicking into place. You suggested we keep it in the safe until after the honeymoon. Said it would be more romantic not to think about legal matters on our wedding day. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. You're going to destroy our future based on a child's fantasy? Nathan, think about what you're doing. But Nathan was already motioning to his security team. Escort Ms. Reynolds to a private room. Don't let her contact anyone. He turned to his assistant, who had been standing frozen among the wedding party. Call my lawyer immediately. I want every document in my safe examined. You can't do this to me. Victoria's composure shattered as security approached. I've given you 2 years of my life. I love you. No, Emma said quietly, but her voice carried in the silent ballroom. You don't love him. You look at him the same way the witch looks at Hansel and Gretel in my storybook. Like he's something to eat. The brutal honesty of a child's observation silenced Victoria's protests more effectively than any lawyer's argument could have. As Victoria was led away, her designer gown trailing behind her like a wounded bird, Nathan knelt beside Emma again. The 300 guests watched in stunned silence as one of the city's most powerful men listened intently to a 7-year-old girl. Emma, how did you know to take these pictures? Daddy taught me that when grown-ups think kids aren't watching, that's when they do bad things. He said good people protect other good people, even if they're scared. Nathan felt something crack inside his chest. This child had traveled across the city alone, had faced a room full of powerful adults, had risked everything to save him from a woman who would have destroyed him. Your daddy was very wise, Nathan said softly, and very brave. Just like his daughter. As the guests began to file out, their excited whispers filling the air, Nathan realized that his life had just been saved by the most unlikely hero imaginable. But as he looked into Emma's serious brown eyes, he also realized that the danger was far from over. The dismissal came that same night. Lucy Turner stood in the servants' entrance of the Blake mansion, holding a cardboard box containing 3 years of her life. Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, couldn't meet her eyes as she delivered the news. I'm sorry, Lucy. The orders came directly from Ms. Reynolds. She still has influence with the household staff management. Mrs. Whitmore's voice was barely a whisper. They say you failed to control your daughter's behavior. Lucy's knees nearly buckled. The job wasn't just income, it was health insurance, prescription coverage, the only thing standing between her and medical bankruptcy. But Ms. Reynolds isn't even. The wedding was canceled. Mr. Blake would never. Mr. Blake is dealing with legal matters. The household decisions are still being handled by the old management structure. Mrs. Whitmore pressed an envelope into Lucy's hands. 2 weeks severance. I tried to argue for more, but the drive back to their cramped apartment in Queens was silent. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her small hands folded in her lap, sensing the weight of what had happened but not fully understanding it. Lucy gripped the steering wheel, fighting back tears that would only scare her daughter more. Their apartment felt smaller when they walked in. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, furniture from secondhand stores. It had been a step up from the shelter where they'd lived after Emma's father died, but now it felt like they might be heading backward again. Emma, Lucy finally said, sinking onto their worn couch. Why did you do that today? Why did you go to the hotel? Emma climbed up beside her mother, her brown eyes wide and serious. Because it was wrong, Mommy. Like in the stories Daddy used to tell me, remember? About the brave people who stopped the bad people even when it was scary? Lucy pulled her daughter close, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. But baby, sometimes telling the truth costs more than staying quiet. Now Mommy doesn't have a job and we might have to. The princess always saves the kingdom, Emma interrupted softly. Even when the dragon is scary. Daddy said that's what makes her a real princess, not the pretty dress or the crown. Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse office, Nathan Blake was discovering just how deep the dragon's cave went. Surrounded by contracts, financial statements, and legal documents, he had been reviewing every business deal from the past year. What he found made his blood run cold. 3 major contracts showed signs of manipulation, subtle changes that would have transferred millions to shell companies. The pattern was sophisticated, methodical, and almost invisible. His computer chimed with a new email from an anonymous account. The subject line read, "The little detective missed something." Nathan opened the attachment and found a digitized children's drawing. Emma's distinctive style was unmistakable, the careful coloring, the attention to small details. The drawing showed Victoria with a tall man in what looked like Nathan's study. But it was the scribbled text at the bottom that made Nathan's heart stop. In a child's unsteady handwriting, Carson, Marcus Carson, Nathan's biggest business rival, the man who had been systematically trying to acquire Blake Industries for 2 years. Nathan reached for his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed his lawyer. Emma hadn't just saved him from a bad marriage. She had uncovered a conspiracy that could have destroyed everything he had built, and now she and her mother were paying the price for her courage. Nathan, Blake hadn't slept in 36 hours. His penthouse office looked like a war room, documents scattered across every surface, computer screens glowing with financial data, and 3 empty coffee cups marking the passage of time. But it was the children's drawing taped to his monitor that kept drawing his attention back to the magnitude of what Emma had uncovered. "Carson," he muttered, staring at the childish scrawl. "How did a 7-year-old make a connection I missed? For months?" His private investigator, Samantha Reed, arrived at dawn with a thick folder under her arm. Samantha specialized in corporate espionage cases, but she had never encountered a case that began with a child's crayon drawings. "I've been working all night," she said, spreading surveillance photos across Nathan's desk. "Marcus Carson and Victoria Reynolds have been meeting regularly for 8 months. Bank records show payments from Carson Industries to Victoria totaling $200,000. Nathan studied the photographs. Payment for what? Access, information, your schedule, your business strategies, your personal weaknesses. Samantha pulled out another set of documents. But here's where it gets interesting and terrifying. This isn't their first time. She laid out 3 case files. Charlotte Morrison, heiress to Morrison Steel, married David Crane last year. 6 months later, she lost control of her company in a hostile takeover, led by Carson Industries. Nathan's stomach dropped. And David Crane? Disappeared with $40 million. Never charged, because Charlotte couldn't prove fraud. Samantha opened the second file. Robert Walsh, tech mogul, engaged to Sarah Mitchell. She convinced him to restructure his company just before their wedding. Carson Industries acquired it 3 months later for a fraction of its value. Jesus. Nathan sank into his chair. They're running a systematic con operation. Using romance as corporate espionage. Victoria was your Sarah Mitchell, your David Crane. Samantha paused, studying Emma's drawing again. The question is, how did a child figure out what seasoned business leaders missed? Nathan thought about Emma sitting quietly in his study, coloring her detective stories while adults conducted their schemes around her. Because she was invisible to them, just the housekeeper's kid, they never thought to watch what she was watching. Samantha's expression grew grim. Nathan, there's something else. Carson Industries has connections to some very unpleasant people. If they realize a 7-year-old girl can identify their entire operation, the implication hung in the air like poison. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The child sees too much. Some problems require permanent solutions. Nathan's blood turned to ice. He immediately called his security team, then grabbed his jacket. "I'm going to Queens. Emma and her mother need protection now." "Nathan, wait," Samantha called after him. "If Carson's people are already watching them." But Nathan was already heading for the elevator. Emma Turner had saved his empire. Now he had to save her life. As his car raced through the morning traffic toward Queens, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late. In his rearview mirror, a black sedan maintained a careful distance, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun like dead eyes. Somewhere in a cramped apartment, a 7-year-old girl was coloring a new picture, this one showing dark figures watching her building from across the street. Nathan's BMW looked absurdly out of place parked outside the weathered apartment building in Queens. The contrast wasn't lost on him as he climbed 3 flights of stairs, each step taking him further from his world of marble lobbies and private elevators. He knocked softly on apartment 3B, and Lucy answered with Emma hiding behind her legs. Lucy's face showed the exhaustion of someone who had spent the night wondering how to pay next month's rent. "Mr. Blake?" Lucy's voice was wary. We weren't expecting you. May I come in? There are some things we need to discuss." Nathan glanced down the narrow hallway, his security training from years of corporate battles making him hyper-aware of potential threats. Lucy stepped aside reluctantly. Their apartment was small but meticulously clean, filled with Emma's artwork covering every available wall space. Nathan found himself studying the drawings as Lucy closed the door. They weren't just child's play. Each one captured details with startling accuracy. "Emma," Nathan said, kneeling down to her level, "I need to ask you something important. Have you seen any strangers watching your building? Anyone who doesn't belong in your neighborhood?" Emma nodded solemnly, pulling a fresh drawing from her stack. "The car people. They came yesterday after we got home. Black car, tinted windows. The man in the passenger seat has a scar like this." She traced a line down her left cheek. Lucy gasped. "Emma, why didn't you tell me? You were crying about losing your job. I didn't want to make you sadder." Emma's matter-of-fact tone broke Nathan's heart. Nathan studied the drawing. Emma had captured details a trained surveillance expert would note. The car's position across the street, the way the driver kept the engine running, even the fact that the man with the scar had been checking his phone repeatedly. "Lucy, I need to explain what's really happening." Nathan sat on their worn couch, finding himself speaking to a 7-year-old as if she were his most trusted advisor. Emma didn't just stop a wedding. She uncovered a criminal conspiracy that's been targeting business people for years. "What does that mean for us?" Lucy's voice was tight with fear. "It means Emma is the only person who can identify the people involved. And they know it." Nathan pulled out his phone, showing them the threatening text. "I'm moving you both to a safe house immediately." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Like witness protection in the movies?" "Something like that." Nathan found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "How do you know about witness protection?" "I watch detective shows with Mommy. And I read lots of books." Emma's expression grew serious. "Mr. Blake, are the bad people going to try to hurt Mommy because I told the truth?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Nathan realized this child had been carrying the weight of adult consequences since the moment she decided to speak up at his wedding. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. "Emma, you did exactly what your father would have wanted you to do. You protected someone when they needed protection. Now it's my turn to protect you." As they quickly packed their belongings, Nathan noticed Emma carefully selecting which drawings to bring. She held up one showing 3 figures, a tall man, a woman, and a small girl holding hands. "Is this your family?" Nathan asked gently. "It's my new family," Emma said simply. "You, me, and Mommy. The bad people can't break families apart if everyone is brave together." Nathan felt something shift inside his chest as he looked at this remarkable child who had lost her father, saved his fortune, and was now treating him like family despite barely knowing him. Outside, the black sedan waited patiently, its occupants unaware that their target was no longer just a 7-year-old witness, but the newest member of one of the most powerful families in New York. The first sign of trouble came at Emma's school. 3 days after moving to Nathan's secure apartment in Manhattan, Lucy received a call from Riverside Elementary's principal. "Mrs. Turner, there was an incident today. A man claiming to be Emma's uncle tried to pick her up early. When we asked for identification, he became agitated and left." Lucy's hands shook as she relayed the information to Nathan. They were sitting in the living room of his safe house, a modest but well-protected apartment on the Upper East Side, far from the luxury of his penthouse but equipped with security cameras and panic buttons. "Uncle?" Nathan frowned. "Emma doesn't have any uncles." Emma looked up from her art supplies where she was drawing the view from their new apartment window. "The man had the same mean eyes as the one who took the papers from your safe, but his hair was different." "Different how?" Nathan asked, his corporate instinct shifting into high alert. Emma picked up a brown crayon. "The safe man had dark hair. School man had yellow hair, but the roots were dark. Like when mommy colors her hair, but forgets to do the bottom part." Nathan and Lucy exchanged glances. A 7-year-old had just identified a disguise that might have fooled adults. The second incident happened that evening. Emma's cat, Whiskers, a orange tabby she'd had since her father died, disappeared from the apartment building's courtyard where Lucy had been letting him play. The security footage showed a man in a maintenance uniform entering the courtyard, but his face was turned away from the cameras. Emma found the man's behavior suspicious for reasons the adults missed. "Maintenance people know where things go," she observed, studying the footage. But he looked around like he was lost, and he kept checking his phone like the car people did. The third incident was the most chilling. When they returned from dinner, Nathan's security team found signs that someone had been in the apartment. Nothing was stolen, but Emma's drawings were scattered across the floor, and her pink camera was missing. "They only took my detective things," Emma said quietly, surveying the damage to her artwork. "They left Mommy's jewelry and your expensive watch." Nathan felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Whoever was behind, this wasn't interested in valuables. They wanted to silence the only witness who could connect Victoria to the larger conspiracy. "Why are they doing this to Emma?" Lucy asked, her voice breaking. "She's just a little girl." "Because little girls aren't supposed to be this observant," Nathan said grimly. "Emma sees patterns that trained investigators miss. She's the only person who can place all the pieces together." That night, as Lucy put Emma to bed in the apartment's guest room, Nathan stood watch by the window. The street below looked normal. Late commuters, dog walkers, couples heading to dinner. But he knew that somewhere in the shadows, dangerous people were planning their next move. Emma appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, holding a new drawing. "I made this for you," she said, handing him the paper. The drawing showed Nathan standing, guarded a window, but in Emma's version he wore a cape like a superhero. Below him, small figures were safely protected inside a house surrounded by tall walls. "You're the guardian now," Emma explained simply. "Like Daddy was before he went to heaven. Guardians keep the good people safe from the monsters." Nathan looked down at this extraordinary child who had turned his world upside down and realized that somewhere along the way, protecting her had become the most important thing he'd ever done. Outside, a car engine started, and Nathan saw headlights moving slowly past their building. He made a mental note to increase security. The monsters were getting closer. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Nathan was making breakfast when his phone exploded with notifications. News alerts, missed calls from reporters, and text messages from business associates, all carrying the same shocking headline: 7-year-old girl exposes billionaire wedding scam. "How did they find out?" Lucy asked, her face pale as she scrolled through her own phone. Social media was already buzzing with Azure Emma the detective and wedding gate scandal. Nathan's jaw tightened as he recognized the leak's source. "Victoria. She's trying to control the narrative before the investigation goes public." On the morning news, Victoria Reynolds sat across from interviewer Diana Walsh, looking perfectly composed in a pale blue dress that made her appear vulnerable and sympathetic. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. "I'm devastated," Victoria said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Nathan and I had a genuine love story, but certain people around him have been filling his head with lies, using an innocent child as their weapon." Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the interview with the same intense focus she gave everything else. She's using her fake sad voice, Emma observed matter-of-factly, like when kids at school pretend to cry to get out of trouble. The interviewer leaned forward sympathetically. Are you suggesting that a 7-year-old was manipulated into disrupting your wedding? Emma Turner is a sweet child, but she's been through trauma with her father's death. Children that young can't distinguish between reality and fantasy, especially when adults with agendas are influencing them. Victoria's performance was flawless. I believe certain people saw an opportunity to use her against me. Nathan felt, his anger rising, but Emma's reaction surprised him. Instead of upset, she seemed almost fascinated. She's really good at lying, Emma said with scientific curiosity, but she blinks too much when she does it, and her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Daddy taught me that tells. By noon, the story had exploded across social media. Videos of Emma bursting into the wedding ceremony circulated endlessly. Child psychology experts debated on talk shows whether a 7-year-old could be a credible witness. Team Emma and Team Victoria hashtags trended nationally. The public was captivated by the image of a small girl in a yellow dress standing up to powerful adults. Editorial cartoons showed Emma as a tiny David facing corporate Goliaths. Parent blogs shared stories about the wisdom of children. The narrative was writing itself, innocent child versus sophisticated criminals. But with fame came danger. Nathan's security team intercepted 3 separate attempts by photographers to get pictures of Emma at the safe house. A tabloid offered Lucy $50,000 for an exclusive interview. Most disturbing, they received dozens of anonymous messages, some supporting Emma, others threatening her for destroying a beautiful romance. I don't understand why people are angry at me, Emma said that evening, showing Nathan her latest drawing. It depicted herself surrounded by cameras and microphones, with some faces smiling and others scowling. I just told the truth like Daddy taught me. Sometimes truth makes people uncomfortable, Nathan explained. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to tell it. Emma nodded seriously, like when the emperor had no clothes in my storybook. Everyone pretended not to see until the little boy said something. Nathan marveled again at this child's ability to distill complex situations into simple truths. But as he watched news vans gathering outside their building, he realized that Emma's moment of truth had made her a target that fame might not protect her from. The real battle was just beginning. While Victoria dominated the news cycles with her victim narrative, Emma Turner sat quietly in Nathan's safe house, doing what she did best, observing and drawing. Spread across the living room floor were dozens of new drawings, each one meticulously detailed despite her young age. Samantha Reed knelt beside Emma, studying the artwork with the intensity of a forensic analyst. This is extraordinary, Samantha murmured, holding up a drawing of Nathan's study. Emma, can you tell me about this one? Emma pointed to various figures in her drawing. That's the day Victoria brought 3 different men to see Mr. Blake's papers. They all wore the same kind of watches and carried the same briefcases, but they pretended not to know each other. Nathan looked over Samantha's shoulder, amazed. I remember that day. Victoria said they were potential investors who wanted to tour the facility separately. I never thought. They were mapping your entire operation, Samantha said grimly. Emma, what about this drawing? She held up another picture showing the mansion's staff areas. Victoria talked to Mrs. Whitmore and the other helpers a lot. She gave them presents and asked questions about when Mr. Blake worked late, when he traveled, when he kept money meetings. Emma selected a red crayon and began coloring a new picture. She was especially nice to people after they told her secrets. Samantha and Nathan exchanged glances. Emma had documented a systematic intelligence-gathering operation that had been going on for months. There's more, Emma said, pulling out a drawing that made Nathan's blood run cold. It showed Carson Industries' office building, a place Emma had never been, but which she'd apparently seen in photographs or documents. The Mean Eyes man has a big chart in his office with pictures of lots of people, not just Mr. Blake. A target list, Nathan whispered. How could you possibly know about Carson's office? Emma's explanation was chillingly simple. Victoria showed pictures on her phone to the briefcase men. She was proud of her collection, like showing off stickers. Meanwhile, across the city, that very collection was being put to devastating use. Carson Industries launched coordinated attacks on 3 of Nathan's business partners. Stock prices plummeted as carefully planted rumors spread through financial networks. Contracts that had taken months to negotiate were mysteriously withdrawn. Victoria, from her temporary penthouse suite, coordinated the assault with military precision. She had studied Nathan's business relationships for months, identifying every weakness, every vulnerable connection. "The Turner situation is becoming problematic," Carson said during their encrypted video call. "The child's drawings are more detailed than surveillance footage. She's making connections we didn't know existed." Victoria's mask slipped completely in private. "Then we accelerate the timeline. Nathan's too distracted protecting his little pet witness to defend his business. Properly, we finished this within the week." Back at the safe house, Emma looked up from her latest drawing, a picture of storm clouds gathering over tall buildings. "Mr. Blake, I think the bad people are getting ready to do something really big. In my dreams, I see you losing all your important things." Nathan knelt beside her, studying the ominous drawing. "What makes you think that, sweetheart?" "Because that's what wolves do in my storybooks. When the little pig figures out their trick, they don't give up. They blow harder." Samantha's phone buzzed with urgent alerts about Blake Industries' stock price. As the numbers flashed red across her screen, she realized that Emma's childlike metaphor was exactly right. The wolves were indeed blowing harder, and Nathan's house was starting to shake. The opportunity came when Emma least expected it. 3. Days after the media storm began, Nathan needed to retrieve important financial documents from his mansion. The house had been sealed as part of the investigation, but his lawyers had secured a supervised visit to gather essential business papers. "I don't like leaving you two alone," Nathan said, checking the safe house's security system for the 3rd time. "But this can't wait. Carson's attacks are accelerating." "We'll be fine," Lucy assured him, though her voice carried strain. "Emma and I will just stay inside and work on her schoolwork." Emma looked up from her coloring book, a new one about brave knights protecting kingdoms. "Be careful, Mr. Blake. The castle isn't safe anymore." Nathan kissed the top of her head, struck again by this child's intuitive understanding of danger. "I'll be back in 2 hours. Don't open the door for anyone." But an hour later, Emma heard familiar voices in the hallway outside their apartment. She crept to the peephole, a habit her police officer father had taught her, and felt her stomach drop. Victoria was there, talking to a man Emma recognized from her drawings as one of the briefcase men. They were speaking in low, urgent tones to someone Emma couldn't see. "The FBI raid is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Victoria was saying. "We need to retrieve the remaining evidence tonight before they find everything." Emma's heart raced. She grabbed her mother's cell phone from the kitchen counter, remembering how the child detectives in her TV shows always gathered evidence. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging on Lucy's sleeve, "the bad people are here. I need to record them like on my shows." Lucy's face went white, but she didn't question her daughter's instincts. They had learned to trust Emma's observations completely. Emma crept back to the door, holding the phone steady despite her shaking hands. The voice recording app was already running. Nathan had taught her how to use it for her detective games. "The child has seen too much," an unfamiliar voice was saying. "Carson wants this resolved permanently before the trial." "I understand," Victoria replied coldly. "Make it look like an accident, gas leak maybe. These old buildings have such poor maintenance." Emma's breath caught in her throat. They were talking about hurting her and her mother. "What about Blake?" the first man asked. "Nathan will be devastated by the tragedy naturally. Grief makes people vulnerable. I'll comfort him through his loss, and we'll proceed with the original plan." A grieving widower is much easier to manipulate than an angry businessman. Emma kept recording, her small hands trembling. On her detective shows, this was always the moment when the heroes got the evidence that saved everyone. But this wasn't a show. This was real, and she was genuinely terrified. The voices moved away from the door, but Emma had captured enough. She stopped the recording and showed her mother, who immediately called Nathan's emergency number. "We Have to leave now, Lucy whispered, grabbing their emergency bag. The back stairs, just like Nathan showed us. As they crept down the fire escape, Emma clutched the phone containing the recording that would change everything. Behind them, she heard the apartment door being forced open. They're too late, Emma whispered to her mother. The little pig already heard the wolf's plan. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emma felt a spark of hope. She had done it again, gathered the evidence that would protect the people she loved. But as they reached the street, a black car turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. The black car's headlights swept across the alley as Emma and Lucy pressed themselves against the brick wall. Emma held her breath, clutching the phone containing Victoria's recorded confession, when suddenly, the car's emergency lights began flashing blue and red. FBI? A voice called through a megaphone. This is Agent Martinez. Are you Emma and Lucy Turner? Relief flooded through Lucy as she recognized Nathan's voice on the agent's radio. That's them. They're safe. 20 minutes later, Emma sat in the FBI field office, surrounded by agents who looked both impressed and bewildered. Special Agent Sarah Martinez, a veteran investigator with 15 years of experience, had interviewed hundreds of witnesses. But never a 7-year-old whose amateur recording was about to crack open a multi-million-dollar conspiracy. Emma, this recording is remarkable, Agent Martinez said gently. But I need to ask you some questions to make sure we understand everything correctly. Emma nodded seriously, her legs swinging from the adult-sized chair. Like when the police talk to kids on my detective shows? Exactly like that. Agent Martinez smiled. Can you tell me how you knew to record those people? Bad people always tell the truth when they think nobody's listening, Emma explained matter-of-factly. Daddy taught me that. And on TV, the detectives always need proof, not just stories. The federal prosecutor, David Chen, leaned forward. Emma, the voices on this recording, have you heard them before? Emma pulled out her art portfolio, the drawings Nathan had insisted she bring everywhere. This man, she said, pointing to a carefully sketched figure, comes to the mansion lots. He talks to Victoria about charts and numbers. And this one, she indicated another drawing, has the same voice as the phone man who wanted to hurt Mommy and me. Agent Martinez studied the drawings with growing amazement. Emma had unknowingly created a visual database of the entire conspiracy network. Each drawing included details that matched FBI surveillance photos taken over months of investigation. The child psychologist we consulted was right, Agent Martinez whispered to Chen. She doesn't have the cognitive development to fabricate complex lies. Her observations are pure truth. What happens to the bad people now? Emma asked. They go to trial, Chen explained. But Emma, we might need you to tell a judge what you saw just like you told us. Emma considered this seriously. Will Victoria be there? Yes. Good. I want to look at her when she tries to lie again. Daddy said sometimes bad people stop being bad when good people aren't afraid to look them in the eyes. Meanwhile, in a federal holding facility across town, Victoria Reynolds sat in an interrogation room, her designer clothes replaced with prison orange. The woman who had charmed her way into Nathan's life was finally seeing the true cost of her choices. Agent Martinez played Emma's recording, watching Victoria's expression crumble as her own voice filled the room. Make it look like an accident. Gas leak, maybe. A 7-year-old outmaneuvered you, Martinez said quietly. She saw through every lie, documented every crime, and recorded your confession. How does it feel to be outsmarted by a child? Victoria's mask of sophistication finally shattered completely. I underestimated her, she admitted, her voice hollow. We all did. She was just supposed to be invisible. Children usually are, until someone teaches them their voice matters, Martinez replied. Emma Turner had the best teacher, a father, who believed in justice and a guardian who believed in her. As the interrogation continued, Emma was across town, safely coloring a new picture. This one showed a courtroom where Truth sat on a tall chair, wearing a blindfold and holding scales. Justice was finally coming, carried forward by the smallest, bravest voice of all. 6 weeks later, The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation. The trial of Victoria Reynolds and Marcus Carson had captured national attention, but the star witness was notably absent from the courtroom. Emma Turner sat in a special interview room designed for child witnesses, speaking to the court via closed-circuit television. The decision to protect her from direct confrontation with the defendants had been unanimous. Even the defense attorneys agreed that having a 7-year-old face her would-be killers in person was unnecessarily traumatic. "Tell us what you saw in Mr. Blake's study," Prosecutor David Chen said gently, his voice coming through speakers in Emma's quiet room. Emma, wearing her best yellow dress and sitting beside a child advocate, spoke with the same clear honesty that had stopped a wedding 6 weeks earlier. Victoria and the briefcase man switched Mr. Blake's important papers. They put the real ones in a black case and left fake ones in the safe. On the courtroom monitors, Emma's testimony played with devastating simplicity. She described each event, without embellishment, answered every question directly, and never wavered in her account. "Did you understand what the documents meant?" Chen asked. "No, but I understood lying," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "When people do sneaky things when they think nobody's watching, that's lying with actions instead of words." In the defendants section, Victoria's expensive legal team had built their defense around discrediting a child's testimony. But as Emma's words filled the courtroom, their strategy crumbled. "Your Honor," defense attorney Robert Kingston argued, desperately, "we cannot convict our clients based on the imaginative recollections of a 7-year-old girl who watches too many detective shows." Judge Patricia Hendricks, a 30-year veteran of the federal bench, had presided over countless complex cases, but she had never seen evidence as compelling as Emma's combination of recorded confessions, detailed drawings, and unwavering testimony. "Mr. Kingston," she replied firmly, "the defendant's own voice on the recording matches perfectly with this child's account. The drawings contain details that have been corroborated by FBI surveillance. The testimony is consistent across multiple interviews spanning weeks. Either this 7-year-old is a criminal mastermind capable of orchestrating an elaborate frame-up, or she's telling the truth." The jury deliberated for exactly 97 minutes, one of the shortest deliberations in federal court history. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman announced. Victoria Reynolds showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Carson slammed his hand on the defense table. "Destroyed by a child," he muttered. "A goddamn child. A child who saw clearly while adults were blinded by greed." Judge Hendricks corrected. "Mr. Carson, you'll have 25 years in federal prison to contemplate that distinction." In her interview room, Emma was coloring a new picture when the verdict came through. Nathan, who had been watching the proceedings from the courthouse lobby, rushed to tell her the news. "It's over, sweetheart. The bad people can't hurt anyone anymore." Emma looked up from her drawing, a picture of a little girl holding hands with a tall man and a woman, all three standing in front of a house with flowers in the yard. "I know," she said simply. "I could tell from their voices that they were ready to stop lying. Lies make people tired after a while." Nathan marveled again at this extraordinary child's intuitive understanding of human nature. At 7 years old, Emma had accomplished what teams of investigators had struggled with for months. She had simply told the truth, and the truth had set everyone free. 1 year after the trial, Nathan Blake stood in his redesigned corporate boardroom, looking at something that would have seemed impossible 12 months earlier, a conference table where 2 seats were specifically sized for children. "The Clear Eyes Foundation officially launches next Monday," Nathan announced to his executive team. "We'll be the first major corporation to include children's perspectives in our ethical oversight process." His business partners had initially thought Nathan had lost his mind, including 7- and 8-year-olds in corporate governance, but the results were undeniable. When children reviewed Blake Industries' proposed projects, they asked questions that cut straight to the heart of moral issues adults had learned to rationalize away. "Mr. Blake," his CFO said carefully, "the board of directors is concerned about the unconventional nature of this approach." Nathan smiled, thinking of Emma's simple observation that had saved his empire. "Children see truth without filters. They haven't learned to ignore inconvenient realities for profit margins. If our business practices can't pass an 8-year-old's moral test, we shouldn't be doing them. Across town, Lucy Turner was experiencing her own transformation. Nathan had offered her a position as Director of Community Outreach for the Clear Eyes Foundation, overseeing programs that brought art and emotional development to underserved children throughout New York. "Mrs. Turner," said Maria Santos, AEDI, teacher from the Bronx, "our kids have never had access to art therapy like this. They're expressing feelings they couldn't put into words before." Lucy watched through the classroom window as children worked on murals depicting their neighborhoods, not as they were, but as they dreamed they could be. The program Emma had inspired was giving voice to hundreds of children who had previously been invisible to the systems designed to help them. "Art saved my daughter," Lucy replied softly. "It gave her a way to process trauma and see hope even in dark situations. Every child deserves that kind of expression." The Blake mansion itself had undergone the most dramatic transformation. What had once been a symbol of isolated wealth was now a weekend community center. The grand ballroom where Nathan's disastrous wedding was supposed to occur now hosted children's art exhibitions and community meetings. Emma had her own studio in what used to be Nathan's private study, the same room where she had first witnessed Victoria's deception. The walls were covered with her artwork, and children from the foundation's programs came twice a week to learn from the girl who had become a local legend. "Miss Emma," asked Carlos, a shy 8-year-old from the after-school program, "how did you know the bad lady was lying?" Emma, now 8 herself and growing more articulate every day, considered the question seriously. She forgot to be the same person when different people were watching. Really good people stay the same no matter who's looking. Nathan often stood in the doorway watching Emma teach other children the lessons her father had taught her. The little girl who had saved his fortune was now using her gifts to empower others. "You know what I love most about this?" Nathan told Lucy one evening as they watched Emma help younger children with their drawings. "She's not just telling them to be honest, she's showing them that their voices matter, that what they see and think is important." Lucy nodded, remembering the scared little girl who had once hidden under desks to avoid notice. She's learned that being small doesn't mean being powerless. The transformation wasn't just external. Nathan had restructured his entire business philosophy around what he called Emma's principles. Simple questions that cut through corporate complexity. Is this fair? Would I want my child to be proud of this decision? Does this help people, or just help us? Blake Industries' stock price had initially wobbled when investors learned about the company's new child-inclusive ethics policy. But within 6 months, they were posting record profits. Turns out that businesses built on genuine integrity attracted both customers and talent in ways Nathan had never anticipated. As Emma worked on a new mural showing children and adults working together to build a better community, Nathan realized that his little hero had given him something far more valuable than financial security. She had given him purpose. 2 years after she stopped a billionaire's wedding, 9-year-old Emma Turner stood before a crowd of 200 people at the Metropolitan Community Arts Center, preparing to give the opening speech for her first solo art exhibition. The gallery walls displayed dozens of her paintings and drawings, each piece telling a story that adults had initially missed. The exhibition's title, painted in Emma's careful handwriting above the entrance, read, "What Adults Don't See." Nathan Blake sat in the front row, no longer the isolated billionaire who had nearly married a criminal. Beside him, Lucy Turner wore the confident smile of a woman who had found her purpose helping other families discover their children's hidden talents through the Clear Eyes Foundation. "Welcome, everyone," Emma began, her voice steady despite her young age. "My daddy used to tell me that truth is like sunlight. It makes some people happy and makes other people want to hide. But sunlight always wins because darkness can't exist where light shines." The crowd leaned forward, captivated by this remarkable child who had become a symbol of courage and integrity throughout New York. Emma's story had inspired similar children's advocacy programs in 12 other cities, and her artwork had been featured in national magazines as an example of how young voices could create social change. 3 years ago, I was scared to speak up when I saw grown-ups doing wrong things, Emma continued, glancing at Nathan with affection. I thought kids weren't supposed to question adults. But my daddy taught me that being small doesn't mean being quiet when truth needs to be told. She gestured to a large painting behind her, a self-portrait showing a 7-year-old girl standing in a church aisle, surrounded by towering adult figures. But in Emma's artistic vision, the child was painted, with wings and rays of light emanated from her small form. This painting is called The Day I Found My Voice. I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is see clearly and speak honestly, even when it's scary. Nathan felt tears gathering in his eyes as he remembered that terrifying day when this brave child had saved him from destroying his life. In the 2 years since, Emma had become more than his protector. She had become his moral compass, his reminder that success meant nothing without integrity. The Clear Eyes Foundation had grown beyond Nathan's wildest expectations. Their children's ethics advisory panels were now being adopted by Fortune 500 companies across the country. The simple questions Emma had taught him: is this fair? Does this help people? Would I be proud to explain this to a child? Had revolutionized how businesses approached moral decision-making. Mr. Blake would like to say something, Emma announced, stepping aside with the natural grace of someone comfortable in her own skin. Nathan approached the microphone, looking out at an audience that included business leaders, community activists, and dozens of children from their programs. 2 years ago, he would have delivered a polished corporate speech. Today, he spoke from his heart. Emma Turner taught me that wisdom doesn't always come with age, he began. Sometimes it comes with the courage to see the world without cynicism, to ask simple questions that cut through complicated lies, and to believe that one person, even a very small person, can make a difference. He gestured to the exhibition around them. These paintings show us what we miss when we stop paying attention to truth. Emma's art reminds us that children see the world as it could be, not just as it is. That perspective isn't childish. It's revolutionary. Nathan's voice grew stronger as he continued. Blake Industries now includes children in our ethical oversight, because Emma showed us that moral clarity often comes from those who haven't yet learned to compromise their values for convenience. We're not just a more profitable company. We're a better company because we listen to voices we used to ignore. In the audience, Carlos, now 10 years old and one of Emma's regular art students, raised his hand. Miss Emma, are you ever scared to tell the truth now? Emma considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Sometimes, she admitted. But being scared doesn't mean being silent. Daddy always said brave people feel fear but do the right thing anyway. And now I know that when one person speaks truth, it gives other people permission to be brave too. She pointed to a wall displaying letters from children across the country who had started their own truth-telling initiatives in schools and communities. Look what happened when I stopped being quiet. Hundreds of other kids found their voices too. As the evening concluded, Nathan watched Emma move through the crowd, talking to visitors about her artwork with the confidence of someone who had learned early that her perspective mattered. She paused in front of her newest painting, a family portrait showing 3 figures of different heights walking hand in hand toward a bright horizon. Is that us? Nathan asked, joining her. It's who we became, Emma replied simply. You're not just my guardian anymore, Mr. Blake. You're my family, and family helps each other be brave. Nathan knelt beside her, this extraordinary girl who had transformed his understanding of success, courage, and what truly mattered in life. Emma, do you know what you've taught me? She tilted her head curiously. You taught me that the smallest voices often carry the greatest wisdom. That truth is more powerful than money. And that sometimes, to see clearly, we need to look at the world through the eyes of someone who still believes it can be better. Emma smiled, the same radiant expression she had worn as a 7-year-old standing up to powerful adults in a wedding chapel. And you taught me that grown-ups can learn new things too if they listen hard enough. As the gallery lights dimmed and families headed home, Emma's exhibition remained illuminated, a beacon reminding everyone who saw it that courage comes in all sizes, wisdom has no age limit, and sometimes the most important truths are spoken by the smallest voices among us. The little girl who had stopped a wedding had grown into something even more powerful. A young woman who understood that real change begins with the simple decision to see clearly and speak honestly, no matter how small you are.